Today, halt!
Good morning, one and all. Let's see. Do I have? I can get my picture on the screen. Not that it's important. My face isn't important. The video contents are important. So listen up. I got a very important thing to discuss to you today. We're going to be drinking coffee and talking about Advanced Squad Leader and trying to give justice to Advanced Squad Leader. Hold on, guys. Let me take a sip. So how did this idea pop up in my head to do a video about giving justice to Advanced Squad Leader? Well, I was perusing Facebook, and a good old fellow by the name of Mark Pitkavage wrote, "I'm getting pretty tired of the ASL bashing I've been seeing in some other wargaming groups here on Facebook. Most by people who probably never really learned the game or did anything but play solitaire, or besides playing solitaire. And, I've seen a lot of people believe in the myth, and I call it a myth, that Advanced Squad Leader is some sort of a cult, a religion, or something that takes you away from your family and preoccupies all your time to the point where you are not able to do anything else but play Advanced Squad Leader." Luckily for me, as a single parent, I did start playing more profusely after 2017, and despite that, I've been able to upkeep my home to a reasonable state of readiness and good standing. I've been able to do certain other hobbies. So those of you that seen my other videos, I do cooking, and cooking is important because cooking improves your state of mind, your well-being, and also drinking good beverages, healthy beverages. I stay away from alcohol. It improves your state of mind, your well-being, and makes you a better player and a better person with interpersonal skills. Now, of course, when you refuse a drink, that's a different story, but hey. So, I forget that. Okay, so Mark is saying, people that never played the game are actually criticizing it. And I've seen that happen, okay? I've seen that happen with people that haven't touched Squad Leader whatsoever, and I've seen it happen profusely with people that have played the classic game up to a certain level, okay, a level of complexity, and then quit and said, this is my sweet spot. I don't want to hear about anything else. Big F deal. Let's keep it respectful. Now, to read out some of the comments here. Now, Steve Pleva is a reasonable guy. I've met him in person, and a well-mannered, chill guy. People have the right to express their opinion, just need to be discerning about who to listen to. Absolutely. And then another fellow by the name of Tom Rodwell. So the problem is that when valid critiques are provided by experienced ASL players, they are often vilified and disregarded. This thoughtful review and subsequent comments, discussion, for example, was responded by the ASL community. And to be quite frank with you, there are people that responded to that were part of the ASL community. And there were a greater number that I would say were not. Or we'll get to this topic in a moment, or that blog spot in a moment. Basically, I found out that there were people that were just reading that article that validated their reasons. They needed validation for their reasons not to play Squad Leader, or Advanced Squad Leader for that matter. Who knows? I can't say that for a fact that was the ASL community as a group. And probably I might be the first person to even address some of these issues in this video today that is part of the ASL community. Now, to what extent am I in the ASL community, other than being a member of our local association and playing on Vassal. Hey, that's the extent of it, really. You could say I'm just an individual. ASL is a great game, but not without its flaws. Agreed. And is there a game without a flaw? That's what you really need to know. And if that is not the case, why is there so much errata and live rules across quite a few games, right? Quite a few games. And this is the blog article that he refers to. He reflects on. He doesn't reflect, but he's mirroring some of the arguments that were presented in this article. And for the purposes of identifying this person, I'm going to simply call him Mark. I'm not going to dox him or anything stupid. I'm going to be very respectful. I'm just going to call him Mark, or we'll figure it out later. And to which I replied, the critique was grossly invalid. It is a grossly invalid critique, and Tom doesn't buy it. In what way? Question mark. That's simply an assertion on your part. You haven't engaged with the author's argument at all. In fact, you're illustrating my point. Well, saying something to the effect that the critique was invalid, perhaps it is my opinion. It's not an assertion, and it's a well-informed opinion after I've carefully read the article. And I'll elaborate further. And I'm being very respectful. Okay, I'm not deriding anybody or ridiculing anybody, and that's not my point here. I really do not want to do that, although it would be entertaining to do so. But anyway, but not proper. In order to dispel a myth, you have to analyze what the person said, and you have to bring an alternative perspective to the table. Okay, and present other facts or contrary facts. But what I've refused to do is engage one-on-one to the point I'm saying, yes, it isn't. I don't want to go to the level of, yes, it is, no, it's not. I told you, whatever. I really want to make a thoughtful analysis presented to you, and then you can make your own mind up. However, at the end of the day, Advanced Squad Leader isn't for everybody. Okay? Nor is any other game for that matter. Okay, the reason why I play Advanced Squad Leader is because over OCS, for example, is I have more opponents that want to play Squad Leader than OCS, or any other game for that matter. Now, granted, there is also a community here locally in Montreal that plays a lot of Company Commander. Is it Company Commander? Combat Commander. Okay, and it's a great game. However, it doesn't appeal to me as much as Advanced Squad Leader. Now, another fair-minded comment that was here I also said 2 or more people have made detailed comments about his flawed analysis. If my memory serves correctly, my comments should be on video. If not, I will publish a new one on this topic. And reading this kind of made me realize why 3,000 people watched the video that I said, my top 5 reasons why I love Squad Leader. And you can read the article yourself here, the comments, but I want to see Ewan's comments, which said specifically that why even bother with negative people. I don't think that, the fellow here was being negative. I just think that he was laying a goose egg. Okay, and I'll explain my reasons why. And this is really the most respectful way I can think of saying it. Other photos here, very entertaining. Advanced Squad Leader. Look at that. How much fun can that be? Anyway, here's the blog article I'm talking about. And for the purposes of the blog article, I'm going to call this fellow here Mark. Oh boy. So Mark, or what does he call himself on the blog article? I'll link the his blog in the description, I suppose. Ah, the tactical painter. Tactical. A tactical painter that's interested in platoon and company level engagements. Great. So, Mark here, the tactical painter, or better known as Mark. So, like I said before, instead of engaging on a one-to-one argument with Mark, let's explore his intent and the merit of his premises. Moreover, is the perspective and ideas that he presents flawed? And my contention is that Mark's ideas about ASL are fundamentally invalid. And here's the reason why. Okay? So from the get-go, the author attempts to portray Advanced Squad Leader as a game about tactical leadership in combat in World War II, stemming from a long and noble line of hex and counter games from Avalon Hill Game Company, with generic roots in games such as Panzerblitz, Panzer Leader, and Tobruk. Now, here's my first bone of contention, or my first argument, let's say. Okay, I think the author is confused between ASL and the history it stems from. The history or the roots that it stems from is Squad Leader, Cross of Iron, COD, and GI Anvil Victory, and those are the original game and the game events that followed, which I have in my sidebar of each and every one of my videos. Okay, and I'll tell you why he is a bit confused in that respect, because he quotes he tries to represent Advanced Squad Leader as a game that with an intent quite different than what he portrays it to be. Okay, I'll elaborate further. Okay, so stay tuned. So let's look at ASL and its intent in the introduction of the rule book. Okay, so what is he trying to say is that, okay, Advanced Squad Leader comes from a long line of tradition of this classic game and all these other somewhat related games that are loosely related by virtue of all being Avalon Hill games. Let's see if we can get the actual quote here. Oh, that was rightly considered unrealistic. Let's see. Hold on. Oh, here it is. In the first paragraph, Advanced Squad Leader purports to be a game about tactical leadership in combat in World War II. It comes from a long and noble line of hex and counter war games from the Avalon Hill Company. The genetic roots in games such as Panzerblitz, Panzer Leader, and Tobruk. Now, in all war games, there are certain concepts that are ported between one war game and another, and including, more notably, in, as I've found out, in war games with naval warfare. There's always some tenets that are borrowed from one game to the next because they make sense. Okay, I think that Squad Leader, what made sense was the IFT table, to the point that, hey, certain folks thought that they were giving away some classified information, and John Hill was a former CIA agent, so who knows? Each of those games strive to improve the idea and game mechanics of its predecessor. And look, I don't think there is that much of a link between Panzerblitz and Panzer Leader and Tobruk, but like I said, there might be shared concepts. That's my opinion. Now, the I go, you go nature of Panzerblitz meant one side could dash armored units across open ground from one piece over to cover another in the face of enemy without the enemy having a chance to fire. That was rightly considered unrealistic and not representative of combat in the period. In response, Panzer Leader introduced the opportunity of opportunity fire, which in turn is further refined into the concept of defensive fire. These changes and evolutions didn't necessarily make any of these games better. Panzer Blitz remains a challenging and rewarding tactical game. What these developments in game mechanics did try to achieve was an improved war game. In other words, one that did improve a job modeling some of the tactical aspects of World War II. The introduction of opportunity fire in Rule and Panzer Leader had made those events taking place on the board feel more historically plausible. Anyway, again, this fellow seems to take the assertion that advanced squad leader, its intent is to become the ultimate tactical war game based on realism. And realism is a somewhat difficult concept to grasp for many people, I think including for the author, because he tries to define it in a certain way. But let's go back to our sources. And the original source is Squad Leader. Okay, here it is, Squad Leader. This is the back cover. If I show you the front cover, it might not be suitable for all countries. And if you look at the Squad Leader game, it goes at the back cover. It starts out with a narrative, okay, about a German leader being cut down by Russian machine gun fire. This is the Squad Leader. This is Squad Leader, a game of World War II tactical combat in Europe. Now you make the instant decisions resulting in life or death of your men, victory and defeat of your army. For you are the squad leader. You direct the fire of your squad, select your plan of attack, and set your defenses against massed Russian human weight of armor. Now, where does it get the idea that this game comes from a long long lineage of noble games? Well, here's the second to last paragraph, and a warning as well in the cover, which probably nobody ever read. Each hex in Squad Leader represents 40 meters. Oh, excuse me. Here, Squad Leader is more than just a game. It is a game system which can be used to portray any World War II infantry action. Its innovative system does for infantry combat what Panzer Blitz and Panzer Leader have done for armored warfare games. Squad Leader provides innovative rules for morale, leadership, machine guns, flamethrowers, demo charges, smoke, hidden placement, sewer movement, off-board artillery, radio contact, anti-tank guns, night actions, wire, entrenchments, mines, bunkers, rubble, multi-story building differentiation, fire, never crossing roadblocks, mortars, and much more. Now, here comes the warning. Be forewarned. Squad Leader, we're not talking about Advanced Squad Leader, we're talking about the original game, is not an easy game. Do not attempt it without prior wargaming experience. Squad Leaders rated tournament level 4 on the AH complexity scale. Now, this is a bit like walking into a store and you're buying a pack of cigarettes and there's a warning on it. If you smoke this product, you're going to get cancer. Not everybody heeds that warning. There are a lot of folks that smoke. And when there's smoke, there's fire. Now, this game is purporting to be complex. There it comes with a warning saying if you're not a grognard, don't attempt it. How many people do you know that heeded this warning? And there are a lot of folks that are still holdouts that say, well, I like this game, and I also know it to the level of GI Anvil of Victory. If not, well, I'm considered an intermediate player, and I'm going to Crescendo of Doom. And then everything's perfect up to Cross of Iron. And why do you think that is? Is because when each gamette was introduced, it was not backward compatible. Not only that, It wasn't you that didn't make sense. It was the game rules that didn't make sense because people back then didn't even have to work with word processors. They typed out the rules and made several mistakes. Or they, in terms of profitability, they compromised quality control. Now let's turn to Advanced Squad Leader and see the true intent of Squad Leader, which is, I'm not sure if my computer will cooperate here, but take a look and read the introduction, okay? And if you don't like to read, I don't think wargaming is something for you. Now, let's see if we can, there we go. Much has changed since ASL was introduced 15 years ago. Back then, Squad Leader, the basic game, was only 9 years old, but the follow-on gamettes had already boxed that system into a corner for the reasons that I just explained. Advanced Squad Leader was necessary in the Squad Leader system was going to progress. Many players in the prior system were upset that those games were now superseded. And there is a Facebook page, which I am a member of, and you can witness that anger or that dismay still being expressed. Okay, many players in the prior system were okay with only the boards being usable in ASL. Others was disappointed that program instructions were not available for ASL. ASL did require both a considerable amount of money to acquire and a considerable amount of time to learn, but the past 15 years have shown that this was money and time well spent. And why is that? It's because this game has worldwide acceptance. It's played globally or across the globe. It has a definite attraction, and amongst all other war games, you can more readily find an opponent for this game than any other war game. Period. Now, the foundation laid in ASL was strong, well thought out, and flexible. So the game has evolved, and they do pay tribute to the late John Hill. The fact that we are printing this second edition is a tribute to the elegance of John Hill's original Squad Leader design and to the hard work of Don Greenwood, Bob McNamara, and Charlie Kibler put into developing a Squad Leader into ASL and then building on that base. Those founders and the company they work for are no longer involved in developing and producing ASL, but the system they built lives on decades later. Now, what does Advanced Squad Leader purport to be from the get-go? So when you read the introduction, okay, so you have one game whose purpose is complexity and to give you the immersive experience of you being the squad leader, not some sort of artificial command and control system. They give you the ultimate decisions, you being the player. And I'll explain something more about that later. So right off the bat, in the introduction of the rulebook, Advanced Squad Leader, what does it purport to be? Advanced Squad Leader, hereafter referred to ASL, is somewhat of a misnomer. The connotation of advanced suggesting that which is more difficult. While it is true that ASL in all its depth may well be more detailed in many aspects than the original basic game, it is our belief that it is far simpler in applications than the whole of its predecessor parts. Meaning, this is an attempt to simplify the complex game that it originated from. Period. I'm not going to go into other detail. You read it. Okay? If you don't read it, you won't believe it. Period. So, this is why I found this game appealing. Okay? Because the rules cover pretty much everything. The rules are also supported by a strong community. Okay? And what does that mean ultimately? When you are playing and you have a dispute, you can clearly find the answer to your question as opposed to being introduced with contradictory decisions, rulebook decisions. For example, oh, mines do not forfeit concealment. Mine clearance do not forfeit concealment. And then you have all these folks that try to convince you that you can do mine clearing because it's a silent activity of poking your bayonet in the ground in face of all your enemy, and you can't get caught because you're close to the. What kind of rule? What kind of idiocy is that? As if they even experience combat. So now we can establish that, hey, advanced squad leader, a bit of a misnomer. We realize that we've made mistakes in the past. We're trying to simplify things, not make them more complicated, but at the same token, we're giving you more detail and more opportunities to get the units that you want and present them in some sort of meaningful fashion. And in fact, there has been math done in terms of studies in armor penetration given certain ammo for each vehicle. And in addition to that, if you read some of the articles about how they established the armor tables and 2 kill tables and everything else, it's based on statistics and trial and error of actual experiments. Anywho, so in the case of Mark here, the tactical painter, what he is asserting is that we are attempting to attain a certain level of realism, but the structure of the rules and the way the design is manipulated, it does not allow you to achieve this realism. And that is a fallacy. It's a fallacy because the equation simply doesn't add up. Okay? It's not a question of trying to attain a certain level of realism. It is a question of, I have a +3 modifier for a building as opposed to a +2 for a wooden building, because for one reason or another, if I want to give an immersive experience to the player, obviously a bullet will have more difficulty penetrating a piece of stone than a piece of wood. And that in turn will give an immersive experience to the player. It'll make that game more palliative. Okay? That is the appeal of Squad Leader. It first appeals to you becoming the squad leader, not some abstract form of command and control. Ultimately, you are the decision maker, okay? And you definitely don't want to have after playing a game or two, you definitely don't want to have the notion that you just were playing a game of craps. You're playing a game that allowed you to experience tactics and the sense of victory. Anywho, so I hope I was clear on that point. Now, going through a couple of my other points, he does have a bone of contention with realism. So, hence, by the second paragraph, we discover the author, or Mark, main bone contention with ASL is that it isn't historically accurate. And the system is too rigid for his liking, although he refrains from being too overt about his intent and generally draws you into the bizarre twilight zone. And I'm not berating him, I'm not ridiculing him, I'm saying the actual fact. Because, okay, what do we mean by realism? Okay, is realism a good measure of, or the realism achieved, a good measure of judging a game? Not only advanced quality, but any game out there. So you have OCS and you have two systems of supply, right? You have the trace supply and then you have actual onboard supply. And you ask yourself now, why do I need that? Because it's a game, pure and simple, right? It's a game, and you have derailable hexes, and that system may appeal to some players, and it might deride others, and might throw them back and say, "Oh, why do I need this complexity?" That's the rule. And if you have any rule contentions, hopefully you have a clear enough rule book that will allow you to gain clarity on it, or you'll have a community that can explain it to you, right? So, is realism a accuracy measure of how a well game, a good game design? I don't think so. But if you do want to make that assertion, okay, you should be an authority on the history, okay, and you must have done plenty of interviews of plenty of veterans from all of the belligerents, not only the United States or British or Russian, all the belligerents, and be an authority of how it actually was to be on that battlefield during that time and gain the perspective from all of the belligerent sides. Now, in that respect, I think that, again, through Chapter A of the ASL rulebook, with all the nationality traits, based on all the historical collections that we had at the time, ASL models the game quite accurately. Now, the other thing that you have to remember is that military doctrine of all the nations during World War II also evolved from 1939 to 1945. It did not stay the same. Soviet military doctrine evolved during that time. German military doctrine evolved during that time. So did the weapons of war. And so did I believe, the British as well. The British at the beginning of the war had their officer class in the back. And since they were not that far, that there was a big distance between the frontline troops and the rear line troops, often if the effectiveness of the troops in the front did suffer. Okay, but that wasn't the case with the Germans or the Americans. The generals typically, were in their rear, but as the war progressed, the belligerents saw the need to have more quick decision making, cutting the distance between the frontline troops and junior officers. So again, if you want to attain that tone of realism, as opposed to putting the player in that perspective, you might have issues. And you might have issues whereby, how do I attain that? So, in terms of realism, folks have told this fellow in the comment section of his blog that basically, hey, the only way to achieve combat realism is ultimately you're going to eliminate your opponent and go to jail. And says, well, stop right there. Why are you associating realism with bloodshed? That ain't what I'm trying to achieve. What I am trying to achieve is a command and control structure. Well, just throw that out the window, because in terms of a command and control structure, it's a squad level game, and the author of the game, the original author of that game, John Hill's purpose was to put the player in the decision making role. Okay, and then but we have a complete situational awareness that normally in combat you wouldn't have. You wouldn't have complete situational awareness in combat. However, to some extent, there's certain forms of intelligence, and sometimes that intelligence is flawed. And we do have HIP, and we do have concealment. And no military in their right mind would go into battle without a map on hand. A map, and knowing the territory where you will conduct your actions, is imperative to any successful military campaign, unless you want to set up people for failure. Don't give them a map, or don't give them a complete known map. What do you want to do? Add a hex grid while you're progressing? Perhaps, but that's not the game intent here. It was never the game intent. So let's turn to squad leader. All right, let's look at a map, and this is a Soviet platoon. Now, I am not an authority in history. I've done some simple research. Right here is a typical 1941 Soviet rifle platoon. And what do you see there that's important is this specifically states 1941, because the platoon structure over the course of the Second World War may have changed. So you have a platoon leader, and you have squad A, squad B, squad C, squad D, and an assistant, and a heavy a mortar team. So I can replicate this in Advanced Squad Leader, and by SSR, if there's any relationship between these players, these leaders, and it's each respective platoon, I can make a special rule. Nothing preventing me from doing that. Now, as you can see, I put the captain here as an 8+1. I put the messenger as a 7-0, and each of the platoon leaders has a different morale level. And again, leadership and rank in my world do not have any correlation. Just because you're a captain doesn't make you a better squad leader than a corporal or a sergeant, for that matter, or a private. Leadership is an inherent quality for each individual, okay? And it's not a function of rank, and people typically make that mistake as well. Now, if I do have a command structure, and this is a platoon, so a company will have a replication of this little structure here, and I can put little labels, and each individual paper counter also has a label which you can do an OBA if you wish, but typically in a scenario you're given a certain amount of squads. They don't pertain to any particular leader, but nothing prevents you from actually associating and making your little make-believe platoons. But ultimately, in a game, even if you have a command and control structure, ultimately, who is the decision maker? It's you, the individual player. So you're just given an added level of complexity that you really don't even need. And in the chaos of an actual combat situation, who actually does the leading? You think just because this fellow has one more stripe than me, they'll be more braver in the face of combat, and that people will actually obey them just because they have rank on their shoulder? You got to be kidding me. How naive can you get? Anywho, I also have a Facebook friend. I've been meaning to meet him at a game convention and talk to him, Carl Paradis. So how Carl Paradis designs games, because he's a game designer, is he puts all the complexities on the table. And then he simplifies everything and makes the game playable. I think this is what John Hill attempted to do. And if he didn't attempt to do it, he would not have achieved a playable game. Number one. And number two, as the game evolved into Advanced Squad Leader, remember Advanced Squad Leader is a misnomer, there was even more simplification. So you can kiss any formal command and control structure goodbye. Okay? And the fact that in combat you're not situationally aware, that too is not historically accurate, because every successful army operation had commanders with at least one or two maps of the area of operations right there in their pocket, okay, close at hand at all times, from the colonel down to the poor little sergeant, and the sergeant could sketch it in his sketchbook as to what he had to do. Okay, so again, two realism arguments that you can conveniently throw out the window. And here's the other thing, okay? Games are not a function of realism. If that was the case, Monopoly, I could take the money in Monopoly and try and cash it in. And as a matter of fact, when my son has taken a vacation to Greece, I gifted him some euros. I went to the bank. I got these paper money, euros, and as a joke, I told him, "Here, I got you some Monopoly money for your trip." And he looked at it. You have to admit that euros look exactly like Monopoly money. Now that's a skill, a realism. Anywho, realism is not as important as scale, and knowing the scale of your game, squad leader being squad level, not company or platoon level, will make your experience even more enjoyable. Now, having said that, the author here, or Mark as I like to call him, the tactical painter, has found an adequate game that allows him to achieve the realism that he wants, and I'm happy for him. Now, just keep in mind that ultimately the war game that has lasted for centuries and has been the other war game that has lasted for centuries and is very simplified and played throughout the globe is chess. And in chess, you don't have a command and control structure either, but each unit has its role. And basically, that's how squad leader works. You have a hero, he has a role, so does a half squad, so does a full squad. The different levels of squads or units with experience, as opposed to from elite to conscript. Even conscripts have a role in squad leader. And knowing how to use each piece in the puzzle will make you a better player. And I think that this author kind of didn't realize that. Now, by trying to convince you, do I want to go through that route? No. Let's say, okay, here's the route I want I want to digress a little bit. So now he has alluded or hinted to these assertions, and he wants to build credibility. Okay, and by building credibility or attempting to do so, here he is portraying himself as an Advent squad leader player, very serious, and here is his trophy. I'm not saying the trophy is fake, but I'm quite disappointed that, guys, in Australia, everything's big. The crocs are big, the kangaroos are vicious, especially towards dogs. Spiders are humongous. Why does the ASL community come up with a small trophy like that? Even here in Canada, our trophies, our plaques are about so big. And Eric, you got my plaque. I want it. I got to go to his house to pick it up. So he's been playing squad leader for 15 years. He's building credibility here in his article. He has won 2 tournaments. And in ASL Journal number 2, he has published 2 scenarios. So have I, but I hardly consider myself a master, and only at the starter kit level. I hardly consider myself a master and an all-encompassing authority. And you know what? I've met people like, Mark and Jim Bishop, right, that have written articles upon articles of material on squad leader. Certainly have won and lost some tournaments, and not one of them would say that, hey, I know it all when it comes to advanced squad leader, because you don't. Nobody does. I think the only body that can say that is Perry, all right, because the buck stops with Perry when it comes to the rules. And again, I'm not trying to be harsh. I did try one of the 2 scenarios as it was originally published, and my experience was not as enjoyable as it could be compared to other scenarios. Now, don't take my word for it, and I know for a fact, because I watched the video, Stu had made a video about Men of the Mountains, as it was revised subsequent to its original publication in ASL Journal number 2. And he found the game a little bit more pleasurable after it was modified and corrected. Now, I just recently got it in Halo Allegiance, actually. And who knows, I might give it another shot. But again, great insights that great insight that he has had 15 years of experience, and that's more than I've played the game. But I don't think anybody can and he certainly doesn't say it outright, but it is implied that he is a knowledgeable ASL player 15 years into his experience. Now, by the fifth paragraph, we get a hint as to where this fellow is going, and the self-contradiction begins. Okay, so Mark, the tactical painter, gives a parting shot to fifth paragraph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At first, it didn't make sense to me. Here I was playing a game considered by many to be the ultimate Second World War tactical game. One that the publisher claims have set the rules that allow you to simulate practically any tactical level engagement in World War II. It would have been great to see where that code came from, yet I was unable to replicate historical events I was reading about. Okay, so it would be great to know where that code came from. However, I already established that the intent of this game system is to simplify the earlier version of the game. Now, I guess that's a marketing elevator speech about Squalier, and the events that he was reading about that he wasn't able to replicate. Let's read it. More recently, I was trying to design a new ASL scenario set in Normandy, and I was immersed in reading about the actions there, trying to work up ideas. I was very interested in company and platoon level actions. Keep that in mind, and particularly focused on the command dilemmas faced by junior commanders. That brought me to a Damascene moment where I realized that ASL had a number of inherent flaws that made it impossible for me to recreate the actions I was reading about using the ASL rule system. No kidding, Sherlock. No kidding. Now, here's where the self-contradiction begins. How can it take you 15 years to come to that realization? First of all, okay, ASL, or squad leader for a fact, okay, its intent was never to replicate command dilemmas faced by junior commanders. It was actually, okay, focused on squad level engagements. Now, I got to give him some credit as well, but because when you read Chapter G with the amphibious assaults, okay, and also the section of pillboxes, I think a fellow like Jim Bishop, that is an authority, could probably lend a hand to all the other ASL players and give us some more insights on amphibious assaults and pillboxes. I think there is some obscurity that can be clarified, and I would give credit to him, to Mark, in that respect. However, what he's trying to achieve with ASL in this respect, okay, is not what the game was intended for. And as for ASL having flaws, that is true for every war game out there. There isn't a war game that is perfect. And in part, I think that when you are working with a model, which is what a war game is, there are no perfect models in the world. there isn't any model that can replicate the actual thing on a one-to-one scale. You'll never be able to achieve a one-to-one scale. Now, having said that, again, this fellow has found a game that is giving him enjoyment, and I'm happy for him. Okay. Now, that was the turning point. ASL remained an immersive and challenging tactical game, but it was apparent that this wasn't the game that did a good job at navigating certain critical aspects of tactical combat in the Second World War. Last year was my ASL materials drifted deeper and deeper into storage. I realized I would probably never play it again and sold it. And here he starts with the reasons why. It's quite unfortunate to hear a thing like that, but again, since he has found a game that he enjoys, it's great. But it would have been, to my liking, if he had focused on or provided a subsequent article, and if he has, let me know, that what did he replace it with? I think that would be more inspiring to write about as opposed to coming up with this critique of a war game that really kind of sounds a little bit on the side of a complete absurdity. And the only fellows that would be enticed by this or convinced by this line of reasoning would be people that actually never really got into an advanced squad leader or never had a pleasurable experience playing the game. Yeah, so I'm asking myself, what is better? Nothing is perfect. And let's take a look at some of the reasons. Again, he's focused on command issues without defining what the command issues are. He's referring to also puts emphasis on leadership rather than squad leader. I can show you that, I think. When I printed out this article, I did see an emphasis here, right here. Okay, to my mind, ASO isn't just a game. It's designed to be a war game, and very specifically one that reflects tactical combat during the Second World War. It's called Squad Leader in bold for a reason. No, it's not Squad Leader in bold. It's called Squad Leader. Both being in bold, meaning it's a squad level focused game that puts the squad and the leadership of that squad in your command and control, and no other abstraction whatsoever. Now, there are other games that do so, okay, and there, in fact, I believe in Sasso there's some sort of command and control structure that Advanced Squad doesn't have, but you are attempting to replicate events with the wrong system. It's as same as that. It doesn't mean that Squad Leader is flawed to the extent that it's not playable. Because if that was the case, it wouldn't have gained worldwide acceptance and acceptance by so many players. The community out there is vast. So we are entitled to ask, what does it show us about command issues of squad combat in World War II? So there is a point also that he says that that the game remains to be an immersive and good experience. So here comes more more voicings of his contention, right? Okay, let's not be mistaken. ASL does not attempt to be a game that exists in its own universe. I challenge anyone to find a single rule in the enormous ASL book that doesn't attempt to reflect a real-world situation. We see rules that make a stone building better protection than a wooden one. Well, that is it is a reflection of reality, and it is adopted in the game to make the game more enjoyable and more playable. It's not an attempt to bring it to the actual events, but It is aimed at making the game more immersive and more plausible. Anyway, we see rules that make stone blah, 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 blah. We see that a unit moves more slowly through woods than in open ground. We see a jeep moves fast along a road, while a tank risks bogging down in muddy terrain. It also doesn't inhabit enough fantasy world. The rules indicate that we are trying to replicate events and military units that occurred in the real world. In fact, the reference point of every single rule is real world. Not necessarily, but here's the deal. The deal is that if you don't have these experiences built into the game, what do you have? Absolute nothing. Does it make it more realistic? Sure. Um, I think that it's a method of achieving playability. Okay, and playability to the extent that the outcome is acceptable to a player. Anyway, however, try interjecting this thought into a discussion in an SL forum that you will be mocked and derided by using a reality document. Well, here's the problem with the reality argument. You have certain rules that, for example, let's take the two examples that he noted here. Stone building plus 3 DRM to your dice roll when you're rolling against infantry in a stone building, and plus 2 for a wooden building. Now, let's say there's a fellow that comes up with the reality argument, saying that, well, buildings in Germany and Western Europe were better built than buildings in Russia, let's say. So I don't think a wooden building in Russia deserves the same DRM as in Germany, and the same can hold true for stone building architecture. And believe me, I have a degree in historical architecture, so I should know. Then what does that do to the game? It is a game, after all, and the game can be played competitively, and people's stature are at stake. And also the system of fairness is at stake. So, and that's one of the arguments I have against the original squad, is when you have that reality argument, instead of a somewhat strong rule structure and fair arbitration of the rules, that reality argument can be taken to a level that makes everything toxic. That's why I don't like the reality argument. And here, the author of this blog pretends to be an authority with respect to the reality of World War II combat. And what does he purport to have as his what does he have as proof of his authority in realism? 15 years of advanced squad leader and winning 2 tournaments and having published 2 scenarios. That to me isn't convincing. In fact, I find it a little bit conceding. That's a proper word. Anywho, so to make a long story short, the command issues that he is deeply in love with were never designed to be implemented in Advanced Squad Leader, or Squad Leader for that matter. And if you try to inject that into the game, it doesn't make the game flawed. It makes your thinking flawed and invalid, because you're looking for an element to replicate that the game was not intended to replicate. As a matter of fact, if you're looking for a game like that, I would say venture into Combat Commander. And he ultimately did find something. So, WWII. Going down to the 9th paragraph, the author attempts to entangle being a simulation with the real world situations as opposed to living in its own fantasy world. That's where we're at. And voices another bone of contention, that being, however, trying to injecting this thought, oh yeah, okay, we talked about that. So he has a metaphorical comparison that draws an unfair comparison of what ASL is, attempts to represent, and what it should be. It is a game that does represent a tactical level combat very well, with a set of rules that have evolved and are more clear than others. Let's not forget scale can go so far. Okay, you can bring combat into your living space. You can afford to build SSRs. Plus, reality can be subjective, where rules can reduce disputes amongst players and allows fair play in this respect. There shouldn't be any room for mockery and deriding. So the author does, this is a fair summary of what I just said. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it, and I just read it. However, okay, he does state in his article that with respect to his voicing of concerns or the failures of ASL, he was derided and mocked, or when he tried to bring the reality argument in there, that's what had happened. And recently I had asked a question that sounded absurd about upper level encirclement, and I'll think I'll find that rule about upper level encirclement and read it to you, and I'll tell you. At first, I did sound absurd, and the reaction was it didn't bode well. But hold on. So here's the rule. A 7.72 upper levels. Encirclement also applies to any non-heroic, non-berserk unit in an upper level building location that cannot trace a path free of an unbroken path unconcealed enemy unit plays to ground level through or past, if scaling, locations with a capital L, it could legally traverse if so inclined. This type of encirclement is broken the instant such a path can be traced. Now, to you, it might sound perfectly clear. And to me, the situation was a unit that was upper level encircled, okay, one level above me, the unit below it, directly below it, became berserk. So at first, my opponent tried to convince me that that unit had nowhere to go. And I said, no, that's the rules to the classic game. In this game, we have a rule for that. So it's going to go into your location. And now you're upper level encircled. And it says, no, the moment my unit, your unit was in the same hex as me, you can forget about it because I could legally traverse out of there if I was so inclined. I could break my unit and leave. I said, that ain't the case. Why? And at first I was a bit taken aback with the comment, why not? Because if you look at, so the type of encirclement is broken, the instant such a path can be traced, was what my opponent focused on. Okay, but what I was focused on is that the free path and locations included the unit's own hex. And then the arbiter of that dispute said, oh, he has a point, but in my honest opinion, you cannot traverse your own hex. So if you are if you're not happy with that, call on Perry to make a decision. And I didn't call on Perry because a rule dispute is not cannot cost a friendship, especially a friendship of 15 years. No, I'd rather lose the game than lose a friend over a rule, and that's how it works. I mean, now try arguing that with the realism perspective. Ain't going to work. You're not going to find a resolution. And again, realism arguments can lead to disputes, and it can lead to unfair, arbitrary decisions about how the game should work. And in a competitive environment, when you are at a tournament, that isn't how games should work. I hope that I made myself clear in that respect. So, and I hope that I dispelled the realism argument and why people should not resort to realism when you're dealing with a game. At the end of the day, you need to have a robust rule system, and you have to have a rule dispute resolution system when it comes to war games to be fair. It's a question of fairness. So then, how do you achieve realism? You can't. You can achieve a certain amount of scale. You can achieve a plausible model, and you can use the proper model to simulate the events that you want. And it goes as far as that. There's no reason to lay a rotten egg. Now, another thing that I found pretty interesting, another assertion, okay, that points to the fact of the author being a bit elitist. So, 11th paragraph, let's turn to that and say, let's see where it's at. So here it is. Okay, here's the paragraph that really irked me a bit. Here's a game about leadership, yet in ASL there is no chain of command, no platoon structure. In fact, no military unit structure at all. Good. It's astonishing that this key element in the way of military forces were organized and operate is missing in its entirety. He can be forgiven for thinking that the Second World War was run by corporals and their squads with no higher levels of organization or command. Why did he have to say that? Actually, and the highest NATO rank that I achieved was corporal. Now, you can forgive everybody for thinking that the Second World War was run by corporals and their squads. Well, here's a Damascene moment, a big awakening. The Second World War was started by a corporal. The instigator of the Second World War was started by a corporal. And in the context of a chaotic battlefield, where close combat ensues, okay, how important is the chain of command, the platoon structure, where multiple units are engaged in fighting in a factory, hand to hand. Sorry, old gent, for excusing you. I know it's tea time, but should I stab this adversary with a bayonet? Please do let me know. Come on. What is this? Baldric? British comedy? Shouldn't get that emotional. Anyway, I think I can jump ahead here because at a certain point in the article, he quotes a historian. And this is great. Yes, here it is. This is a quote from the Recollections of a Tank Commander, David Rinder, in the indication of what combat is like. Then ASL is wide of the mark. The frictions of war, chance, bad weather, mistakes, and ill fortune are only certitudes of combat, along with death, injury, and destruction. War is a random and bloody business, where the weird geometry of chance has its play and its frictions, and human fallibility and fragility abound. Combat is fast-moving, confusing, and often bewildering. There is no perfect science, only perfect intent that is unlikely to withstand first contact with the prevailing realities on the ground once game is joined. And the enemy also gets a vote in the outcome. Thank you for writing that, Tactical Painter Mark, because it perfectly describes my ASL experiences, right? The frictions of war. God, is it immersive. And I have to hold myself back from getting excited when I'm playing squad leader. Chance, the roll of the dice, and God Almighty, I have a good collection of dice, and I'm working on creating my own. Look at that. Dice, 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 chance, chance, chance. That's a cheer. These are cheer, advanced quality pom-poms. Bad weather. Do we roll for weather? Yes, we do. Mistakes and ill fortune. Have we put that 9-2 leader in the forefront, but he ends up being in the back or getting wiped out by a sniper roll, a good sniper roll? Yes. The only substitutes of combat along with death hark back to the original squad leader narrative, where the German leader gets cut down by a staccato of machine gun fire from a Soviet squad. Awesome. War is random. Do we play with dice? Yes, we do. It is completely random. Fast-moving combat, you better believe it. My Friday nights with Dennis, each and every one of my opponents. Let's run them down. Dino, Alain, Ken, Mark, and Dennis and Monty. God Almighty, is it bewildering, confusing, and fast. There is no perfect science. Let me tell you, when your opponent is going to dice you, they're going to dice you. Only perfect intent that is unlikely to withstand first contact, and whatever plan I draw, I've seen it collapse. So with that said, and an hour 11 minutes into this video, I'm going to conclude there, because I cannot better describe advanced squad leader better than the fellow David Reinder, as he described it in a quote with the tactical painter. I think that's enough said. And let me know if you agree or disagree. I had great fun not only reading the article, but going through it again, just to validate the reasons why I play Advanced Squad Leader, and happy that I am. Unfortunately, the author of this article has left the ASL community and found better things that are more satisfying to him. And I have to hand it to him. He is an excellent painter, so I highly recommend and well versed in different theaters of war. So let's see, 20 millimeter. I like World War II, but let's take a look at Afghanistan. He has 6 posts on Afghanistan. Look, it's a great blog in terms of miniatures, of miniature games. So in that respect, I highly recommend it. But whatever he wrote about Advanced Squad Leader, do take it with a grain of salt. I'm not afraid that you won't. I think most people that are familiar with the game won't even bother even reacting to it like I did. I'm glad that I read the article, and for me it's a validation as to why I play Squad Leader, and to others it might be a validation as to why they shouldn't play the Squad Leader. What I think is important is find a game that you like, play it to your heart's content, have fun, stay healthy, roll low, and until I see you next time, take care everyone, have fun, and be kind.